This is called basic yoga. And one of the basic understandings that we all need, whether you're a teacher or you're a beginning student, is how to engage your muscles. In this video, we'll learn the 3 ways that we can engage our muscles in standing poses for yoga. Let's begin. We'll be working on muscular strength. So often in yoga, people say, "Oh, I just love to stretch." Yoga certainly includes stretching, but gaining strength is quite important before you stretch. In a standing position, let's work on engaging our muscles. Just take your right forearm forward and let your hand go limp. And just kind of feel the muscle. Just take your hand right to the middle of the forearm and just kind of feel the muscle tone there. Now spread your fingers and lift your hand up. Really engage nicely. And now feel the forearm and notice the tone of the muscles. The muscles are protecting the bone, they're protecting the joints. Engagement in yoga is very important. You can release your hand. Now let's do the same thing with our foot. So just spread the toes and then relax the foot on the right leg. Lift your toes up and spread them and release your foot down. Do you notice how you engage when you lift your toes up and you spread them? You are able to draw the muscle to protect and engage the muscle in a way that protects the bone and the joints. So release your right foot. Let's go back and just let's go to the left arm now. As you lift your left arm, just start with the hand not engaged at all. Give it a nice loving hug. Now spread the fingers of your left hand, lift your fingers up, and just notice how the engagement occurs in the hand, in the forearm, and you can even start to feel it all the way up the upper arm, maybe even to the neck and the shoulders. That's how we engage the muscles. Release your hand down. Let's do the same with the foot. So just reach your left foot forward and lift your toes up. And notice with the lift of the toes, the spread of the toes, how the left leg becomes engaged. Relax it down. Let's do that one more time, just so that you can now understand the contrast. Lift the toes up, spread the toes. Notice how the kneecap even becomes engaged and release it down. So, with that understanding, one of the principles about engagement of the muscles is you feel like the muscles are actually hugging the joints and the bone. You feel this tone occurring. Another way to feel that muscle engagement and strength is by hugging the midline. Step wide on your mat. As you step wide, look at your feet. They should be parallel to each other, the tips of the toes in line with each other. Place your hands right at your hip points. Easily, you could just go so wide that you kind of lose the tone in the legs. Find a position for you that allows you to draw your feet in such a way that you feel a toning occur in the inner thigh muscles. You feel the legs engaging nicely, and you're hugging into what's called the midline of your stance. If you draw a line straight down from your spine to the mat and hug into that line, you feel the legs engage so fully. Interlace your fingers behind your back and open your heart nicely. Keep hugging the midline with your legs. Keep them active and just draw down just slightly. We're not trying to get a deep hamstring stretch, just mostly seeing if we can keep this hugging action into the midline. As you're ready, lift yourself up. Release your hands. One way to notice that strength, to notice how you can really integrate these actions in the poses, is hugging the midline in these wide stances and standing poses. Let's do one of the most common, probably a pose you'll do every practice, to turn your right toes out and bend your right knee to come to virabhadrasana number 2. So you want to hug the midline. So it's a slightly different stance. Your toes are turning out. Hug the midline. From there, expand out. Have your arms feel so engaged with a nice spread to the fingers. As you look out over your right hand, just drop yourself a little bit deeper in the pose. Keep your back foot very firmly rooted to inhale and lift yourself up out of the pose. You can release your hands, turn your feet so that they're parallel. You've got that hugging in action, hugging to the midline. Turn your left toes out and hug the midline again. Get the nice action in the legs. Bend your knee, hug the midline again with this strong action in the legs. Inhale, lift your arms up, spread your fingers again so you get this nice muscle tone in the arms, and take your gaze out over your extended fingers. Keep your back leg so fully engaged. It's still hugging in toward the midline, just as the front heel is hugging in toward the midline. Root down to inhale and rise up. Release your hands. Have your feet parallel to each other. You can just heel toe your feet in or step in. The hips were facing the long edge of the mat. Now the hips will be facing the short edge of the mat. So standing tall with your hands right at your hips, step your right leg back. As you step your right leg back, now if you were to draw a line straight down from your spine all the way to the middle of your mat, that becomes the midline of your stance. Now you're hugging the midline again, the same action that we were doing to get strength in our legs, to get this strong muscular action. To integrate the actions of the pose, we need to have both legs hugging the midline. As you place your hands right at the hips, keep your back leg very firm and just draw slightly forward until you feel just a little stretching of the back side of the leg. Maybe both legs you're feeling it, but especially the back leg. Inhale, root down through the back leg and rise up. Step your back foot forward and trade sides. Take your left foot back. And once again, imagine there's this line right in the middle of the mat, and your feet are equal distance from that line, but you're drawing them in. It's like you're scissoring the legs. You're keeping them very active. You're hugging the midline again. The back heel is rooted. With hands to your hips, just draw your heart forward and keep your back leg strongly rooted as you just kind of bring that awareness to the strength that the legs exhibit as you hug the midline here of the mat. Root down to inhale and rise up. Step your back foot forward. We've covered 2 points about engaging the muscle. One would be an engagement of the muscle to protect the bones and the joints. Another one is to draw in toward a midline in your stance. And the third one is to draw from the fingers all the way to the heart and to the pelvis to draw from the very tips of your limbs. So from your fingertips, you draw up the arm. From the toes, you draw up the leg. Now, how do you do that? When you draw from the fingertips and from the toes all the way into the most weight-bearing part of your tadasana, the hips, just notice how you have this full engagement. To engage fully in tadasana really is an expression of how you can exhibit this strength and courage just through engaging the muscles properly. So let's take a nice wide stance again. And as you take a wide stance, just as we did earlier, turn your right toes out, bend your right knee. With the right knee bent, draw from the toes all the way up to the pelvis. And just kind of notice how toned the legs feel. When you feel all the way from the pinky toes to the pelvis, how engaged you feel. Draw your right forearm down to the top of the thigh. Take the head of your left arm bone back. Keep drawing from the toes all the way to the pelvis. Now reach your left arm up and get a nice spread to the fingertips. So from the spread of the fingertips, you find now the tone of the arms so fully. Your legs are inspired and feeling strong. Now, so is your arms as you draw from the fingertips to the armpit all the way down to the pelvis. You get this nice length as you reach your arm over your head in parsvakonasana, this side angle stretch. Root down through the back foot and lift yourself up. Release your hands. Come to the opposite side by turning your right foot parallel to the short edge of the mat, the left toes out. Bend your knee in the same way as if you have this kind of energy stocking on. You're drawing from your toes all the way up to the pelvis. Take your forearm down. And the forearm is not just hanging out. You're keeping it active by spreading the fingers. From here, reach your right arm up. Draw from the fingertips all the way to your armpit, from the armpit all the way down to your pelvis as you reach your arm over your head. And you get this nice feeling of expansion as you draw in. So now can you expand out from the pelvis to the crown of the head and out through the fingertips? You get this full length. From the back foot, root down to inhale and rise up. Exhale and release. Step your feet hip distance apart to come to Tadasana. In this mountain pose, you start to understand how you're able to integrate these actions. The breath is so basic to the understanding of how you practice. And now the engagement of your muscles, equally important, so basic to your yoga practice. It's time now to lie down so that you can assimilate these actions that you've done to understand the basic moves of yoga, the basic understanding of how to engage your muscles fully. If you don't have time to assimilate these actions, please move into the rest of your activities for the day with ease. Namaste.